And the government's discussing reclassifying cannabis laws. We have a head-to-head with David Blunkett and the rabbi who runs a drugs education charity. Now, should cannabis be reclassified? It used to be a Class B drug, but 4 years ago it was downgraded to Class C. When Gordon Brown became Prime Minister, he ordered a new review of the drug's legal position because of reports that stronger strains of cannabis were becoming available. Well, the Home Secretary, Jackie Smith, says she has an open mind, so we've asked two people with a very strong interest in the subject to come and argue it out. David Blunkett was the Home Secretary who took the decision to downgrade the drug, and Rabbi Aryeh Sufrin is the head of the drugs education charity Drugsline. This former Home Secretary stands by his decision to downgrade cannabis, but reckons there's a case to upgrade super-strength skunk. A drug is a drug is a drug. That's according to Drugsline's Rabbi Sufrin, and he wants cannabis bumped back up to Class B category.
Yeah, since the reclassification, we found a complete change in the classroom, whereby there was a certain degree of acceptability. And together with that acceptability also came confusion. The confusion as where they stand in terms of the law now. Since the government and the police authorities have downgraded cannabis from a Class B to a Class C, that spells for us a green light, which means it can't be dangerous anymore, it can't be a problem. Even the government have accepted. And it's taken a long time to actually reverse that understanding.
The reclassification of cannabis from B to C was firstly to reflect the way in which the police were operating. They were actually giving people warnings rather than going through charging and in court. Secondly, to get the message across that trafficking in drugs, including cannabis, was not only illegal but was extremely dangerous, and we increased the penalty for cannabis trafficking from 5 to 14 years. Crucial now in terms of the Chief Constables believing that there's greater domestic production.
I most certainly do think that cannabis should be reclassified as a Class B drug, and this is based purely on our own experiences, primarily on people that call into our crisis line, and also a very large drugs education program, which is self-evident from the feedback we get from young people as to their confusion in relation to where they stand in terms of cannabis today since it was declassified.
Well, I'm slightly bemused by those who claim that young people are deeply confused, because the confusion arises because of constant changes. After all, if there's been around a 20% reduction in the last 4 or 5 years of usage by young people, if they're coming forward in greater numbers, which they are, for treatment, and if we've been tougher, which we are being, in terms of penalties for trafficking, then I would have thought that it's the oldies like us that are confused, not the young people themselves.
Don't forget, if one has traffickers and pushers, you've got to have a supplier. Yeah, they are the suppliers, you've got to have a user. The traffickers and suppliers are not going to be in business if there's no consumption. So what's the point of one end of the spectrum, which is let's take care of the traffickers now and the suppliers, and we won't be so concerned about the consumer. The consumer has to get it from somewhere. Where is the consumer going to get it from? They're getting it from those that own supply. The only way to stop supplying and trafficking, other than shooting everybody, is actually to stop the usage totally. Now, how do we get people to stop using? We get people to stop using understanding what that usage does.
At the time of reclassification 5 years ago, we had the Frank campaign, which had the greatest number of contacts on the internet and telephone of any government information and education campaign. It was a success. I believe it contributed heavily to the fall in cannabis usage that's taken place. I think we need to get those messages across that cannabis remains illegal.
How much is being spent on drugs education? And you'll have a minuscule amount, if anything, will come into that. And that's got to be a big question. So we want to reclassify? Absolutely. But what about the education that comes along with it? And that also has to be resourced, and that resourced in terms of education, resourced in terms of financial support, in order to ensure that there is a cohesive, multi-pronged approach to drugs education in this country.
I haven't changed my mind about the reclassification. Given the drop in usage, given the understanding of young people, given the danger of even further confusion, by all means let's take action in relation to skunk, but let's not confuse the population even more than they apparently are already.
Yeah, interesting debate there. There's more on those arguments on our website. And you can also let us know what you think at the usual address, the address on the screen there now, bbc.co.uk/politicshow.